Well, good morning and welcome back. It is now April 18th and it is a gorgeous morning out here. Still cold at about 2 degrees above, but we've had enough sunlight in the last day or two here now that we've melted off that little bit of snow that we did get kind of last week and into the weekend. And now you'd hardly even know that it even happened. It is dry on the surface again, but hopefully it was cool enough that moisture soaked in. Here in the seed row, we're at about 0 degrees in this barley. This barley was planted on the 9th, so that's 9 days ago now, and you can see it's really only just barely started to germinate. In fact, I looked at this barley back on Friday and it was basically at the same stage. So basically there's been no progress since last week. You know, soil temperature being that low, things are just going to sit there and do nothing. So it's basically just barely starting to germinate. So hopefully a few hours of sunlight this afternoon and through the rest of this week, things are going to warm up and start moving along. Well, with how much frost I'm seeing in the seed row, it might be a few days before some of these units are moving again. One thing I have noticed is there's very little for new kochia germination this week. You can see here, you know, there's some dead ones here that were disturbed by seeding last week, so they're pretty much dried out, mummified here now. But even with that little bit of moisture that we got last week, there's pretty much no new germination yet because it was just too cold. But give it a few days of warm weather, we might see otherwise. Well, winter wheat overall this week is looking pretty good. I'm not seeing any problems in here from the weather last week, although you can see the stinkweed has a little bit of yellowing around some of his leaves here, some little bit of stress curl on them here and there, so that's no problem. I like seeing stinkweeds get sick, but the vast majority of them are perfectly fine. The winter wheat itself looks pretty good. I don't think it's much the worse for wear. There's the odd frosted leaf tip here and there, but considering that we were minus 20 with the wind chill for quite a few hours last week, it's looking pretty good. Well, today's lesson in gopher biology is that baiting season is rapidly starting to come to an end. As you can see, this pasture land here, as well as ditches and fence lines and all the fields, are really starting to green up. So now that there's green grass to eat, the gophers are going to be much less inclined to eat bait unless they're out in the middle of the field where there's nothing green. And also the females are pretty much all pregnant and in gestation at this time. So once those pups kind of start to emerge, which will be in a couple weeks yet, you know, each female gopher I should say, is going to have roughly 6 pups. So there will be a lot of them available at that time. Well, we're Tuesday morning now. Once again, we were below 0 overnight, but not as bad as previous night. I think we only got down about -2, -3, and in some spots we had a tiny little shower of rain. But now we're under severe wind warning for 100k winds this afternoon, and I believe there's a 80% chance of snow later today at some point, but I guess we'll see what happens. If it's 100k winds, we probably ain't getting any moisture. Well, even the kochia hasn't grown too much in the last week. You can see here we got a bunch of little seedlings that have germinated. I know these guys were here last week. They really have not gotten any larger at all. Maybe the odd one here and there where they were sheltered a little bit more, but overall not a whole lot of growth in the last week. Well, here's a very interesting field next to one of mine. I'm not sure exactly whose field this is, but it appears to be winter wheat that is seeded on about a 3-inch row spacing. So it's a very heavy seeding rate as well as very close spacing. So should no doubt yield pretty well, but will probably be pretty susceptible to lodging. But I guess we'll follow along with this as the season continues. Now, wind made my original audio of this recording completely unusable, but this is basically the same pea field I dug the samples out of last Tuesday to do a germination test after freezing, and you can see these peas really have not grown to any appreciable degree. They may have on average gained about 1/8 of an inch on the sprout length, so very little growth. And here you can see I uncovered a Canada thistle. Of course, this is coming up from a rhizome underground where the soil is probably a little bit warmer yet. And he was still about a 1/2 inch underground, so probably would be emerging in the next week or so. So they are on the way. Well, here you can see some of the salt migrating out of the saline slough, and this plume of salt is traveling for absolutely miles today. Of course, it's all part of the saline cycle out here on the prairies. This particular slough basically dried out last year and still dry, not a drop of water in there now. So that salt is going to blow onto the neighboring land, and probably over the next 100 years, that salt is going to get put into solution with water and slowly seep back into this low spot, fill up that slough with salt again. So all part of the cycle of the prairies. Wonderful, isn't it? This was by Colehurst Wednesday morning, another windy morning, but we did get a little touch of snow overnight. This is fall rye, and overall it survived the cold weather last week pretty well. Just the odd scorched or twisted leaf tip, which may have been more wind damage than anything, and overall was looking pretty good. And the bit of sun that we had on Tuesday was able to warm up the soil a little bit, so a lot of these fields just started to test above zero. Well, it's now Thursday morning. We got a few flakes of snow coming down, and it's a chilly 2 degrees. And soil temperature surprisingly does seem to be recovering. We had a few hours of sunlight yesterday, and now our soil temperature in this particular field is up to 3 degrees. So that's not too terribly bad, considering yesterday morning a lot of these fields were still at zero. Well, this week I am starting to see some signs of canola germinating here and there, but it's pretty few and far between. You know, on this I gotta, kind of dig down through where a swath was here, and you'll find it underneath the straw, and that's because there's enough moisture underneath the straw. Elsewhere in the field, where say the soil would be warmer in areas like this, that surface soil is so dry that there's just nothing germinating in it yet. So still seeing very little for canola, but that should change anytime. Well, I'm way down south here now at the St. Mary's Reservoir, taking a look at an alfalfa field that the farmer wants to spray out and reseed into barley. But you can see with the dry and cold soil conditions down here, this alfalfa is only just barely breaking dormancy. A lot of it is only just like first trifoliate leaves haven't even unfolded. Not really a good showing of it yet. We need at least another week of good sunny warm weather down here before any of this is going to be big enough to have any hope of spraying out so we can seed barley. Well, here's a weed we don't see too terribly often, so it's time for question of the week. So this weed you'd quite commonly see rangeland pasture areas, has kind of a fern-like leaf and has a very strong taste. So put your guess down below as to what it is. Well, here's that patch of eroded wheat down by McGrath again. Looks like there was some further wind erosion here on Tuesday when the winds were so high, but you can see this wheat is really starting to recover. We do have some fresh growth since the original damage did occur, so it'll be delayed in this spot for sure. Maturity will be a little bit slower, but it is trying to come back alive anyways. Well, we're Friday afternoon, and it looks like we actually have a cloud system moving in. It may not come far enough north to hit us, but it sure would be nice if it would. We could certainly use some moisture. Maybe we'd even see this strange mythical material I keep hearing about from guys farther east called mud, but we'll see.